So, Mark, let's jump right in. Why can we expect instability in Iran for years to come?
Well, hi, Arthel. Thanks for having me. Look, the Iranian people, by and large, despise this regime for its corruption, its repression, its brutality. And as we see, they're back on the streets. I mean, we had reports coming out over the past few days that Iranians were unified in their grief for the death of Qasem Soleimani. Many of us challenged those reports, saying that the majority of Iranians despise this regime. And sure enough, they're back on the streets yelling, "Death to Khamenei, Soleimani, you're a murderer," expressing their contempt for this regime.
And you, Mark, and you and your company were sanctioned by Iran earlier this year for promoting economic terrorism. I mean, is this because you're hawkish on Iran?
Well, we've backed diplomacy with Iran. We've backed sanctions with Iran, peaceful instruments of American power to try and get this regime to stop its malign and destructive behavior. I don't think that makes you hawkish. I think that makes you, cool-headed and looking for a way to actually resolve this issue, and I think those aspersions are quite unfounded.
I want to move on to this because you've seen the reports as well. Mostly Democratic lawmakers, but Republican lawmakers as well, were not satisfied by the administration's explanation for assassinating Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And some argue that President Trump is making a mockery of congressional powers by the way he handled his decision. And meanwhile, Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah has signed on to Senator Bernie Sanders' bill to prevent funding for military intervention. In fact, Senator Sanders tweeting earlier this morning around 11:30 this morning, he says, "I am proud to partner with Republican Senator Mike Lee to pass our No War Against Iran Act. Defending the Constitution is not a partisan issue. We will do everything in our power to build bipartisan majorities in Congress to prevent this war." So, Mark, back to you. Are you surprised by this? And does this have any implications about future bipartisan efforts to maintain congressional power?
Look, Arthel, Qasem Soleimani was designated as a terrorist by the Bush administration. He was designated by the Obama administration as a terrorist. He was designated by the Trump administration as a terrorist. The President of the United States has full authority within his powers to go after terrorists. Barack Obama went after terrorists, George Bush went after terrorists, and Donald Trump is going after terrorists. There's been strong bipartisan support to use military force or other instruments of American national power to take terrorists off the battlefield. And I think that Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders I think this attempt to constrain not only President Trump's ability, but a future president's ability is wrong-headed.
Let's go next door, westward to Iraq. According to reporting by the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. is warning Iraq that if the roughly 5,300 U.S. troops in Iraq are expelled, Iraq will run the risk of losing access to its New York Federal Reserve account, which is where oil sales revenue is kept, which could take a major hit on Iraq's cash flow, as you know, and its overall economy. So does this mean President Trump wants U.S. troops to remain in Iraq, or is President Trump more concerned with keeping Iran from moving in?
Well, I hope the president is going to keep U.S. troops there, because if U.S. troops are withdrawn, then Qasem Soleimani will achieve in the wake of his death what he couldn't achieve in his life, which is driving the United States out of Iraq and out of the Middle East. And I think that it's exactly the right move. I mean, we need to play hardball with Iraqi politicians, some of whom are backed by Iran, many of whom are threatened by Iran. And the Iranians are playing hardball inside Iraq. I think this was exactly the right move by the administration to say, you're going to lose your oil money.
Okay, and if the U.S. pulls out of Iraq, does Iraq then turn to China for support?
Well, I think Iraq turns to Russia, to China, and certainly to Iran. And so we'll essentially be ceding much of the Middle East to the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese. And I think it's a big mistake. I mean, we have vital interests in the Middle East, including energy interests. You know, we're not energy independent. The price of oil is set globally. If there is a huge conflagration in the Gulf, the price of oil goes to $150. Gasoline will be at $6, $7. That's going to have a major impact on our economy. We remain committed to the Middle East. We have to do so in a smart way. We don't have to be engaged in nation building, but we have to do what President Trump has done. Use limited military force in a potent way to take off a terrorist mastermind.
So would you say U.S. troops in Iraq are vital to stability in the Middle East? And do you feel that our troops in Iraq are safe?
I think we need to do everything we can to make sure they're safe. We need to reinforce the presence there. But of course, they're absolutely vital to our interests in Iraq and into the broader Middle East. We need American military power. I think it was a big mistake of President Trump to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. I think he's walked back that decision wisely. And I think the latest indications from President Trump are that he's not going to let the Iranians and Qasem Soleimani's legacy drive us out of that key and strategic area.
Mark Dubowitz, we will leave it there. Thank you, Mark.